Pretty, sweet-smelling flowers belie the insidious, all-consuming growth. As one plant is pulled like a hydra from Greek mythology, many more grow to take its place. The name bestowed to this plant by Linnaeus in the 1700s means to entwine the field. Others have called it devil's guts or possession vine. Today we are talking about the gardener's bane, field bindweed. I'm Christy Gladham. I have worked in biological control for over 10 years. Welcome to the Colorado Department of Agriculture's Biological Control Series in collaboration with the USDA Western Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program. Field bindweed, Convolvulus arvensis, is a perennial vining plant in the morning glory family. Introduced to North America from the Mediterranean region in around 1739, it now has global distribution. It begins growing in late spring, sending up vining tendrils that can be anywhere from 8 inches to 80 inches long. The flowers of field bindweed have fused petals forming a small funnel shape. Bindweed flowers from midsummer into fall. The flowers may be either white or pink, and they bloom for a single day. The flowers will open in early morning and wilt by late afternoon. The leaves are shaped like arrowheads and alternate down the stem. Field bindweed can form long tendrils that may climb up vertically by wrapping around other plants or man-made objects like fences. If they don't have objects to climb, these tendrils can make large tangled mats on the ground. Field bindweed forms an extensive creeping root system that is typically 2 to 10 feet deep, but may reach depths up to 30 feet. These vertical roots can produce lots of lateral rhizomes or spreading roots. The rhizomes are usually in the top 12 inches of soil, but may be found up to 2 feet deep. The rhizomes can produce new above-ground shoots, forming large bindweed colonies that may overlap to cover several acres. Bindweed spreads through both seeds and through the extensive root system. Seed production can be rather prolific, 2 to 8 seeds produced by each flower. The seeds have been reported to remain viable in soil for up to 50 years. This means that any disturbance of the soil could bring up old bindweed seeds and start new infestations. Fragments of roots can also produce new colonies and be carried long distances by agricultural equipment. Usually these fragments need to be a few inches long, but it does mean that severing plants from the parent might just create more plants. Because so much of the taproot can be very deep underground, bindweed is able to store abundant resources within its roots that help it to recover and regrow new above-ground shoots after being pulled, sprayed with herbicide, or tilled. This is what makes bindweed so well adapted to disturbed sites such as roadsides, agricultural fields, old homesteads, or garden beds. Bindweed is usually only found in disturbed or distressed landscapes. In these settings, bindweed may impact the other plants present by smothering or strangling plants directly. Bindweed infestations are also known to be able to reduce soil moisture significantly in the top 2 feet of soil, exactly where those lateral roots are typically found. This reduction of soil moisture is especially problematic in drought-stricken areas where bindweed can be a superior competitor for low soil moisture. This may reduce crop yields or stunt other plants. The tendrils of bindweed may also cause issues with horticultural or agricultural equipment, literally binding equipment up. Control of bindweed can be particularly tricky. It is most often found in disturbed and distressed landscapes where competition is low. Bindweed does not tolerate shade or too much moisture very well, so encouraging growth of early spring plants and providing extra moisture can be reasonable to decrease field bindweed populations. Mechanical control, pulling or tillage can be used successfully if you are particularly tenacious. Bindweed will be able to recover from pulling or tillage with its extensive root system. If you pull or till all bindweed every 2 to 3 weeks through the growing season for 2 to 3 years, it is possible to eradicate colonies. Hand pulling may be the best strategy in places where bindweed plants are individual and cannot be tolerated, such as garden beds. Tillage may be the best choice in large agricultural fields. However, in pastures, along roadsides, or with very large infestations, mechanical control might not be possible. Herbicide can be applied, but again, will take multiple applications over several years. In areas where the land is already degraded or of lower value, or in sensitive ecological areas, it may not be possible to apply herbicide. If you have large, extensive, non-irrigated patches of bindweed that cannot be controlled by hand pulling, tillage, or herbicide, and the goal is to reduce the density of bindweed on a longer time scale, say 5 years, while leaving the plants intact, then biological control could be the right choice. Biological control requires minimal input, reduces invasion potential for neighboring properties, and reduces disturbance of the land as much as possible, but it will not fully eradicate bindweed. It must be actively managed. As always, before considering collecting biological control agents, please ensure you have the proper permission or permitting to do so, and ensure the biological controls are permitted and allowed in your area. Movement of biological controls across state lines is permitted by the USDA APHIS PPQ and subject to rules and regulations. In the case of field bindweed mites, Aceria malherbae, these mites are not permitted for movement into California, as there are several native morning glories that are rare or threatened. There may be other local rules and regulations, so please reach out to local weed managers or extension agents if you are unsure about bindweed mites in your area. The bindweed mite, Aceria malherbae, was introduced for control of field bindweed in 1989 to the U.S. from Greece. It is possible to see these mites under a microscope, but they can't be seen by the naked eye and can't be felt or perceived. Mites are not quite insects. They are closely related to spiders and ticks. However, these mites are only interested in plants. They are a galling mite, which means they cause unusual damage to the growth of plants. The mites overwinter on the root buds of field bindweed. When the plants start growing in spring, the mites will move to the actively growing parts of the plant and begin feeding and laying eggs. Each generation from egg to adult takes around 10 to 14 days, so there can be lots of generations in a year and the generations overlap. The mites may retreat to the roots of bindweed when temperatures get very hot in late summer and the bindweed stops actively growing. They may come back out in the fall, but then they will retreat back down into the roots to overwinter, and they will persist from year to year. The mites cannot move very far on their own. In lab studies, the mite was found to move only about a foot during its lifetime. They also need to be in contact with living bindweed tissue in order to survive during their short life cycle. Because of their very small size, mites can be moved around by wind, by pollinators like bees, or by small mammals like mice and prairie dogs. When bindweed mites feed on field bindweed tissue, they damage the plant and cause a reaction of disorderly plant growth called galling. They will primarily feed on the upper leaf surface along the midrib of the leaf. This causes the leaf to fold in on itself and contort, becoming a crescent shape. There will be characteristic grainy or fuzzy-looking yellowish damage to the exposed midrib of the leaf. This is a great diagnostic tool to show that bindweed mites are present even in low numbers. This also will help to differentiate between mite-damaged leaves and very young leaves that have yet to unfold. When mite populations get very high, the distortion and galling of bindweed can become quite severe. Normal leaves won't form at all, and a gnarled mass of plant growth occurs instead. These galls act as energy sinks for the root system. The roots will send energy to create all of this growth, but the galls are not capable of photosynthesizing or sending resources back into the root system. Though the bindweed may still persist, heavily galled plants do not form flowers, set seed, and are not competitive with other vegetation. The plants remain very small and will not have twining growth that climbs, smothers, or binds plants and structures. This will prevent the vast majority of issues that bindweed can cause in the landscape. Over time, this expenditure of energy could even deplete the root system to where the bindweed colony may collapse. Collecting bindweed mites for release is incredibly easy, though finding a good collection site can be more difficult. Again, please make sure you have permission or permitting required to collect bindweed mites. I usually focus on looking for large field bindweed populations that are conspicuously not flowering. This is best to look for in late May through June and during the early part of sunny clear days when bindweed flowers first open and before they would typically wilt in the hot afternoon. Drier sites will typically have better mite populations. Vigorously growing bindweed can outgrow the effects of mites. Field bindweed that appears healthy in spring may still have mites, but the growth is too fast for damage to accumulate. Sometimes these sites will have excellent galling later in the summer towards August and into September. When a site with lots of galling has been identified, bindweed mites can be collected from May until August. To collect field bindweed mites, you will collect the galled plant material. This will involve pulling or clipping plants that have galling. You may choose to use gloves or clippers, but they are not necessary. It is a good idea to remove all seeds from galled plants to prevent new infestations at the release site. The galled plant material can be placed in paper bags. There's no specific set amount needed for a release, as even a small bit of galled material might have thousands of mites. I like to place about a golf ball to baseball sized amount of galled plant material out in multiple places throughout a patch. Depending on your release site, you may want to collect a couple pounds or just a few ounces of galled plant material. This collected material can be stored in a refrigerator for up to 4 or 5 days, but the sooner the mite-containing material is released, the better. You do not want to store galled plant material in plastic, as excess moisture might make the plants mold and will kill the mites. Good release sites for field bindweed mites will be non-irrigated, continuous patches of bindweed. Releasing bindweed gall mites is a little involved. The mites cannot move very far on their own, so it is really important to get infested material in close contact with actively growing bindweed. As the infested plant material dries out, the mites can move onto the healthy bindweed. You will want to separate out a bit of infested plant material about the size of a golf ball or a little larger. With this bit of material, you can just drop and stomp it to get the material firmly adhered into the soil in healthy bindweed, or you can be a bit more targeted. You can position the bits of galled plant material close to the base of the healthy bindweed near the roots. You can then take a tendril of the healthy bindweed to wrap around the galled material to keep it in place and set a rock on top of it or pin it with a stick. Repeat placing infested plant material on healthy bindweed plants throughout the infestation. I usually place releases 10 to 20 feet apart. In small infestations, this could be scattered throughout the entire patch, but in very large infestations, you will want to focus on the center of the patch and work your way outwards in a spiral pattern, placing infested material every 10 to 20 feet. This will help disperse the mites the best throughout the patch, even if you can't cover the entire area. I like to take a photo of the field bindweed patch for future reference, a GPS point, the amount of galled material applied, and the date of release for my records. Mites may not work in all areas. Mites have been reported to reduce bindweed by up to 90% at some sites and have had little to no effect at others. There's not good data on why this is, and you may just have to test the mites at your site. After applying galled plant material, you may begin to see crescent-shaped leaves with that grainy, fuzzy-looking mite damage within 2 weeks of release. After seeing signs of galling, you can either repeat the process of hand-moving galled plant material, or you can mow the field bindweed patch to spread the mites. When mowing, it is important to try and either bag the clippings to spread over the bindweed, or mow in a pattern where the clippings will be directed back onto bindweed. You want any mowed plant material that contains mites to be in contact with growing bindweed, otherwise you'll just be reducing the mite population. Mowing is usually more effective when there is a lot of galled material. With only a few galls, it may not be as effective as hand collection and release. It may take 5 to 10 years to see the full results of mite releases on field bindweed patches. Moving the mites throughout the patch and adding stress to the bindweed with other management could help you see quicker and better results from mites. Non-lethal herbicide application, mechanical removal of bindweed, drought conditions, or shading could all add stress to the field bindweed colonies that will enhance the effectiveness of bindweed mites. Herbicide can be applied at a sublethal dose to burn down the growth of bindweed throughout the summer. At lower application rates, mites were seen on the regrowth of field bindweed just 3 weeks after application. When performing mechanical removal, try to ensure any galled material is placed onto nearby bindweed so that mites are not getting thrown out. Mites may not establish at all sites, and it may take several years to see significant results even when established. The combination of mechanical removal of growth, drought, sublethal herbicide, and mites may provide the best control for field bindweed. I hope this video has given you the information, methods, and confidence to identify, collect, release, and manage field bindweed gall mites. There will be a list of references and sources in the video description if you would like to read more about these helpful mites and how you can manage field bindweed. Thank you for joining me today.